Give Dad the gift of Father's Day fun, starting with a great selection of gear from Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store today or shop online at academy.com. Also, enjoy free in-store pickup with all your online orders in just 2 hours. So don't wait. Shop Father's Day gifts at Academy.
Fisherman's Oath. More fish, more often.
Hello and welcome to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. This episode is titled Fishing the Shallows for Inshore Slams. I'm going to be talking to Captain Tommy Sports of Sports Fishing Adventures, and he operates out of sea level, operates all over the core sound. We'll be covering such areas as times to go, planning, transition zones and structure, and then ultimately tackling gear. My name is Gary Hurley, Fisherman's Post. Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community since 2003, bringing you fishing reports, fishing information, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, and here in our latest and greatest effort, the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. And it is in this podcast series that we reach out to our captain and guide friends up and down the North Carolina coast and ask them to share with us their thoughts, their insight, their knowledge on how to catch more fish more often. And in this endeavor, every week I'm joined by my podcast partner, Billy Thorpe of Thorpe Creative. Billy, it's good to be talking podcast again.
Gary, it's good to be talking fishing. Are we talking podcasting? I can do that too. I can nerd out.
I don't
want
to talk podcast. I want to talk fishing.
Yeah, man, it's good. It's good to be back. It's been a minute. Man, we have been busy creating some content around here, so it's been a lot of fun between our fishing reports and forecasts each week and the podcast each week. Man, it's been a lot of fun. So I probably spend more time with you now than I do my family and my wife, but you know, whatever, it works. I like it.
I mean, let's ride this creative train until we have to get off. I mean, right?
Yeah, right. What else do you guys want? Let us know in the comments what other kind of content. Gary, he has a few more nights of the week we can take up and record stuff. No problem. He's good for it. Oh, man, but it is a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun to be joined by our sponsors, Marine Warehouse Center and Bland Landscaping. So I want to take a minute to shout those guys out for making all this stuff possible and this podcast possible. So first up, we got Bland Landscaping Company. They have locations all throughout North Carolina, and they're looking for people to come work for them and really make a career move. So you can go to their website, blandlandscapingcompany.com, and check them out. And then also hit them up for some work. I'm sure if you got some work for them, they won't turn you down. They'll quote you.
I'll tell you what, man, I thought about Bland Landscaping. You know, the wife schedules parties at the house and the yard has to be neat and tidy for these parties at our house. And I'm sitting here thinking, why am I spending a day, sometimes even more than a day in the yard? Why don't I call Bland Landscaping? I mean, I didn't call them, but I was thinking, why wouldn't I? And I got to be thinking, again, other people are like me. You get a day off. Do you want to spend in the yard or you want to hop on that boat and try to catch more fish more often?
Yeah, man, you should call them, have them come do your yard work, and we'll create more content, Gary. It'll be fun. It'll be great. So
no, I don't want to do content. I want to fit. I want to be outside. I want to play.
I want to be on my boat. Oh, whatever.
Yes.
All right. Enjoy your boat, Gary. All right. Speaking of boats, Marine Warehouse Center, I get a quick message from them, and we'll be right back.
In Warehouse, we have everything. We have new boats, we have parts, we have accessories, new trailers, we have a complete service department with highly trained technicians. Anything you need to get out on the water, we have it.
At Marine Warehouse Center, as we've grown over the last few years, now have a large section of marine supplies from start to finish for all your boating needs.
What I love about this region is to be able to get out on the water, and also we love to be able to get you out on the water.
The best part of working at Marine Warehouse is being able to get involved with the customers and share a love for the water.
There
Good
you
dudes.
go, man.
Sales, service, parts. They got it, man. They'll take care of you. They took care of me.
Yeah, go get a job at Bland. Then actually hire your own company, Bland, to mow your yard, and then go buy you a boat and have those guys work on it as need be and keep you on the water.
Sounds like a great summer.
And just follow Gary around for all the fishing spots.
Yeah, you can follow me. I mean, you're a fool if you do, but come on, follow me. You know, you just got to.
Fun.
I follow my captain friend. You know, follow me. I'm following someone else. We'll follow somebody. Maybe we'll catch a fish. I don't know. But I tell
hope
you
people
what.
are enjoying my jokes because I've gotten some training. I've been hanging out Marine Warehouse getting some training from Tyrrell. So.
Oh, are you telling the joke this week?
No. I'm not telling. I mean, I was just
Oh.
referencing my jokes throughout the episode so far. That's all I was talking about.
I got you. Well,
Yeah.
Terrell did have a joke, although I urge people to stop by Marine Warehouse Center or call or email and help Terrell out because he's got to be coming to the end. He's got to be coming to the end. And I mean, I don't know. You're a bigger fan.
All right.
Here's Terrell's joke, not mine. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready when
Terrell's
you are.
joke, not mine. What is the name of a boat made out of stones?
Something about sinking. I don't know what that is.
It's a hardship.
All right. That's pretty funny.
Is it?
I spend too much time with a 3-year-old. Okay. I'm maybe not the best judge of funny or not funny.
Please go by and talk to Terrell and give him jokes, please.
I love it, man. I hope everyone does. It's one. Yeah. He's probably like, why are all these people coming in here telling me jokes? This is ridiculous. Stop doing that.
That would be beautiful. Send us fish photos. Speaking of fish photos,
I got one right here for you. We got Colby Wallace hooked this 24-inch red drum using a live menhaden on a bottom rig while fishing in the Swansboro area. I don't know what's bigger, that fish or that smile on that kid's face, but I'm glad he's having a good time because if I caught that fish, Gary, I would also be smiling that big as well.
yeah, man, I'm digging that. I was not looking at the fish, I was looking at the smile, and that is a great shot.
Yeah. Was that a testimony from our podcast? I'm sure it was. We don't have to answer that question. I'm sure that kid listens to the show, did what the captains told him to, and slayed a big fish. Sure,
if he didn't, we're gonna edit that photo right out of the show.
Yeah, do some research, figure it out. I'll edit.
Man, it's never too early to learn life lessons, kid.
You're not the only smiling kid with a fish. All right, we'll replace you. But really do send your fish photos in to Gary and don't text them to me. A lot of people text me photos. I just keep them on my phone. I just Photoshop my face on there and show it and send it to the next guy. So.
Well, look, we've already plugged our weekly fishing reports. So I am going to say Billy's best takeaway will be coming to you just at the conclusion of my conversation with Captain Tommy Sports. Billy's best takeaway. And again, I'm making that transition because we've already promoted our weekly fishing reports behind a paywall. All you got to do is go to fishermanspost.com. But right now, it's my pleasure to welcome to the show Captain Tommy Sports, Sports Fishing Adventures. Welcome to the show. Fishing the shallows for inshore slams. How you doing, Tommy?
I'm doing well, Gary. Thank you for having me be a part of your podcast today.
My pleasure, Tommy. My pleasure. Now, I know you've seen the show. We've talked about the fact that you've seen the show, so you know that the tradition is 2 questions before we get to the main event. First question, you tell me you're ready. I'm going to give you question number 1.
All right, go ahead.
Because right now I'm wondering, why should we listen to what you have to say about any of the inshore slam species, let alone you're going to be talking to us about inshore slams in general? Why?
Well, I think that question can be answered in 2 parts. Number 1, with the podcast that I've listened to, you usually bring competent captains to the table, folks that understand what they're fishing for. And with that, your vetting process, the fact that you've invited me to come be a part of it, I feel like I'm fairly confident in what we're going to be discussing. Secondly, I've spent the last 13 years exclusively fishing saltwater. And of that, the last 6 years fishing core sound, which is what I'm going to be referencing a lot of today. Along with core sound, anybody that's been on core sound knows it's a shallow water body. A lot of flats throughout the bank side and the land side of core sound. And through my years of fishing core sound, I found it to be successful in catching inshore slams. Caught several last year. I've already picked up on several this year, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the summer. So hopefully I'll be able to share some information be of benefit to someone somewhere along the way.
That is a great and acceptable answer. As far as vetting you, I don't know. You were like the only guy that said yes this week. But if you want to feel vetted, then I'm going to say you were vetted. Question number 2, as tradition goes, is a non-fishing related question. Right. Are you ready for question number 2, Tommy?
I am.
All right. I took a play off an inshore slam. So I was thinking about slams. I was thinking about the best slam. Tommy Sports, this is trivia, I guess, and opinion. What is widely regarded as the best slam in all of pro wrestling history?
Ooh, the best slam. It's been a long time since I watched wrestling. I grew out of that probably 40 years ago.
Well, I'll tell
Let's
you who
see.
did the slam, and maybe you can tell me who he slammed. Hulk Hogan is the one that performed the slam. And again, this is widely considered the biggest slam in pro wrestling history.
Maybe Ric Flair.
Andre
Andre the Giant.
There you go. Andre the Giant. All right. Enough of pro wrestling history. And someone might tell us we got it wrong, that there's a bigger slam in pro wrestling history. But let's
All right,
talk
very good.
fishing the shallows for inshore slams. In your show notes, if I got this right, first we're going to talk about when we can expect to have success if we're going to do that type of fishing. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can talk about that. There's been some debate, Gary, over, what is a flat and what is an inshore slam. I don't know if it's necessary to discuss that today, but if you want to, we can. We can just jump right in.
Give me what you got.
Okay, well, quickly, quick assessment of what I understand a flat to be is an area or zone of shallow water that has very little contour changes. These areas can be expansive in size, several thousand acres, to smaller, a couple hundred acres. I've got some aerials that I'm going to share with you with today's podcast that will reflect some of that. But also, these areas are composed of sand, grass, silt, mud, and the transition of all of these. A lot of tidal channels, a lot of times on the back side of the flats. At least that's what I refer to as a flat. Could just be referred to as a shallow area. But by IGFA international rules, an inshore slam would be targeting and catching a game species of flounder, red drum, and speckled trout in one single day. So along those lines, the best time, in my opinion, to pursue an inshore slam while fishing the shallows would be between the months of May and October, primarily because the speckled trout, they use these flats as spawning grounds. They'll come in and between the months of May and October, spawn several times before they move back into their winter transition zones. The peak of the spawning time for speckled trout, by what research that I've looked at, is during the month of May, and they will spawn every month throughout the summer. So they relate to the flats with respect to that. With the flounder migration coming in off their winter patterns, they will be maneuvering all throughout the sound, and they utilize the flats throughout the summer and the transition zones that you'll find on the flats. And anybody who does much red drum fishing knows that shallow water is an excellent place to look for them and target them as they're in the migration zones of the flats. So outside of that, May through October, excellent months to target an inshore slam, and we're right here in the middle of it.
So if I were to say your one favorite month, though, Tommy, what's your one favorite month?
Going off of my experience, Gary, June is a really hot month, not just temperature-wise, but several inshore slams that I've caught personally and had clients catch that had zero saltwater experience come out with a little bit of instruction describing what tactics I use and what techniques I use. They were able to put together an inshore slam on their first trip. So June's a really good month to get out and pursue an inshore slam on the flats of Core Sound.
So now we're talking about planning, I believe. And so how is it that we plan to target the flats for an inshore slam, or how is it that you plan to target the flats for an inshore slam?
Well, there's several things I think to take in mind when you are planning a trip, wanting to fish the flats. First off, I think you need to know what the capabilities of your boat is, what your capabilities as a captain are, and what those limitations are as well. as you are planning a trip, know what your boat is capable of doing, what kind of water you're capable of maneuvering your boat into. As you'll find, getting in on the flats, you may have some areas that you can get in, and there's areas that you can't get a boat into on certain tide swings. So understanding the day's wind, which is very key to determining what area that I'm going to try to target, especially if I'm using trying to drift through a flat. What's the forecasted winds for the day? What are the wind speeds and direction? What are the predicted tides and the time frames of those predicted flood tides or ebb tides? Ideally, I'd like to try to hit the peak of a flood tide 2 hours on each side of that. Gives you the most access into these shallow waters without having to worry about working your way back out. Understanding the moon phase and the tidal coefficients and how that's going to play a part with the amount of tidal swing that you do have. Anybody that's been on saltwater doing much fishing, you understand that on a full moon and on a new moon, you have the greatest tidal pool. And then on the half waxing, half waning, you have a much lesser pool of the tide. So you got to play all these factors into account as you're planning for a given day. Oftentimes before I go out and plan the day, I take a good look at some aerial imagery. At least that's what I did in the beginning. And anybody that does not have much experience fishing the flats, I highly encourage you to look at some aerial imagery, whether it be Google or whatever other platform it is that you decide to use. But understand the area that you're going into. And one thing I think is important is when you understand, or when you're taking a look at that aerial imagery and you pick an area that you want to get in and fish, that information is only as good as you take away after ground truthing it. I've got pretty much a philosophy. If you want to know it, you need to tow it. And with that towing being time on the water, and that's really the only way that you're going to know the water that you're working is spend time on the water.
All right, hold on. I want to interrupt for a second because I want to follow along with what we're doing. So we're going to come back to the tides and the moon phases and the science paper you want me to write. But other than that, I'm intrigued by Google Earth because a lot more people are using that. And again, you're talking to us about core sound. And we do want to understand core sound, a great place, like a beautiful place. Everyone should put it on their list to fish it at least a couple of times. But, certainly some people are watching this, hoping they can take away something to fish in their own backyards, their own flats. So forgive me, I don't spend much time on Google Earth. I'm still, as we joke, hopping on a captain's boat who's done the work, and I'm not doing that. So Google Earth, are you really able to see flats on Google Earth, or is it dependent on what tide they took that satellite shot, whether or not you can really tell it's a flat or not? I guess I'm asking for a little bit more
can see it.
Google
Absolutely.
Earth direction.
Yeah, you can see it. And part of those aerials that I sent, you can clearly see where the flats are at. And that's one thing I was going to try to share in this, that's what I look for when I'm looking for transition zones.
And are you looking for big areas to call flat? So what is it that gets you excited? Again, if I were to put you in a new area, clearly you're familiar with core sound, but if I were to put you up, say behind Hatteras or behind Oregon Inlet and put you to work at Google Earth, what is it that you're looking for?
I'm looking for those transition zones, those areas that come out of deep water into the shallow areas. I'm looking for the transition zones where you have the grass migrating up against sand, silt areas. Areas within a flat that have some low profile or low relief structure that fish and bait are going to relate to. Also, when fishing flats, what I'm looking for and trying to relate to on Google Earth is where we have these continuous beds of grass that we can drift across and work those areas for certain species. I found over the years of fishing, at least the flats and core sound, that certain zones, at least how I refer to them, are more productive than others when you specifically are looking for trout or specifically looking to catch flounder or red drum. So we can go over that as well if you'd like.
So, man, am I looking, and then again, and I know I'm sort of jumping around a little bit, but if I'm then putting my time in on the water, if I see a spot, am I looking for something that has like 2 feet of water at high tide, like more feet of water at high tide, like it's at least covered at low tide, or is it okay to be exposed at low tide? Like what
Well,
makes
yeah,
for a ideal zone?
you aren't really going to know what it's like, Gary, until you get out and ground truth it. And that's what I mean by spending time on the water. Um, what I would recommend anybody who's not familiar with this is to get out and explore, get out and find an area that they're interested in, learn what you can about that area, and take that aerial imagery that you've been looking at and apply it to the ground where you're fishing. That's where you're really going to learn what areas you may have a couple foot of water to work with and what areas are going to be completely exposed on a low tide.
Well, I guess that's what I'm asking. Like I was imagining I was on the water, that I wasn't going to be able to determine that from Google Earth. I guess I'm just asking for your opinion. Again, kind of like I said, what's your ideal month? You said June. So is there an ideal flat? Like, is it 2 feet of water at high tide, or it can be 4 feet of water at high tide? Is it never exposed, dry land exposed at low tide, or is it okay to be exposed at low tide? I'm just kind of wondering your opinion about ideal for those people to keep in mind when they are out on the water checking out their own backyard.
Probably the most ideal depth on a flood tide would be 3 to 4 feet. I mean, it's going to give you plenty of water to work when the tide does fall out. You mentioned having areas that are exposed on a low tide. When you do have a flood tide, sometimes you can drift across those and catch some red drum that are working their way through, possibly some flounder that come in on a high tide. As the tide does pull out, the fish are going to move along with that. So if you're looking for a specific water depth, you're not going to gather that off of Google Earth, but you can get an idea of where the shallow areas are at, and looking at these shoaled areas or these grass flats that are on the backside of them before you go into the tidal channels up along the bankside.
Okay, man. I follow all this. I was just trying to come up with. I mean, you're giving us more information. I was trying to, dumb it down, I guess, or something. Mm-hmm. What else did you have? I mean, and now I might have thrown you off rhythm. What else did you have for planning, man? So we're on Google Earth and we're scouting out some zones, and I follow you about the limitations of the boat. And I guess you're mostly talking about just what kind of skinny water your boat will do, or what kind of skinny water your boat won't do. I guess that's what you were talking about. And so what else am I missing on the planning stage, or what else did you have planned to share with us on the planning stage?
Well, just understanding where those transition zones are at. And one of the biggest things that I have learned over the years is having an identified entry and exit zone. I've come in on the flats, and these are some lessons learned from me in the years past. You come in and you're having a good time fishing, the tide fall out from up underneath you, and you're going to spend several hours in there waiting for the tide to come back in before you can navigate out. You learn where those really shallow areas are at. So I think identifying where your entry and exit zones are at, planning ahead, and if you do find that you are working an area that's going to be too shallow, having time to get out of it. Now, someone in a kayak, you can get in work these shoals, these flat areas, no problem, regardless. You get in, I've got 2 different boats to operate out of. One's an 18-foot aluminum tracker boat that drafts about 10 inches. I work pretty much all over the tides in that, and all over the flats in that, and kind of know where I need to be when I need to be. But I had to learn some of those lessons the hard way. My other boat drafts 14 inches. It's not going to go where my flounder gigging boat will go. So I think knowing your boat, knowing its capabilities, limitations, and then again, your capabilities as a captain working in those areas is probably of most benefit.
Are you able to get an idea of an entrance exit point from Google Earth, or does that really just have to happen once you're on the water in real time?
I think you can get a good idea of where those entry and exit points are at just looking at the color changes that Google Earth has on it as you're studying the flats. The darker areas of the aerial imagery a lot of times indicates a little deeper water. Your lighter colored areas on the aerial imagery a lot of times indicates the shoaled up areas and more shallow zones. And we can go over some of those if you'd like to try to describe that with the aerials that I provided.
Yeah, man, I like that you have transition zones and structure in the notes, and I think this is a good natural time to go to a slide. You want us to bring up the first slide?
Yeah, let's go to slide 1. We'll talk about that just for a minute.
So what am I
Okay.
looking at? First, tell me what I'm looking at.
All right, so basically this is the southwest side of Core Sound. That island that you're looking at on the left-hand side of the photo is Harkers Island. Come due east off of that to the right of the screen is an area that I'm referencing that would be similar to what I fish in a flat. That particular area, if it's mapped out, it's about 1,500 acres. It's a large area, and if you don't know much about Core Sound, these areas can be intimidating. So I picked this small area on Google Earth to bring up. And as you look, if you come just east of Harkers Island there, as you come into that grassy area, you can see where it transitions into a shoaled area before it comes into the grass area on the off side of the shoals. Can you see that, Gary?
Yeah, man.
Okay, so basically I break that down, if you will, to zone 1 being on the outer edge, where you come up out of the deeper water into the shoaled areas. Coming off the shoaled areas into the predominantly grass areas as zone 2, and that's just how I reference it. Then when you leave the grass, moving into some of these tidal creeks that are on the bank side, I refer to that as zone 3. So with that, you can look on the south side, southwest corner of this, and this particular bank is oriented from southwest to northeast. You'll see some darker colored areas that I would identify as an entry zone on the southwest side. You come up just a little bit, you'll see an area that showed up that has some darker areas around it. If I were just looking at this and not know anything about it, I would predetermine that may be a good exit point. Certainly to the far northeast, there's another good exit point, as you can see some deeper water. But you're looking at a 4-mile stretch there. So if you're drifting, through that area, you've got a lot of ground to cover before you come out on the exit side on the other end. So picking somewhere in the middle, and then ground truthing it once you get out in the water to determine is that an area you want to come back into and try or not.
So do those exit points that you're eyeballing, are those also serve as fish exit points when the tide starts dropping out?
It could be at times. I find that when I'm fishing in the entry and exit points, I have caught fish, but I don't think they're necessarily relating to the deeper water as much as they're relating to the transition zones that are in those areas. I encourage anyone that's interested in this, if they want to learn more about it, to pull up Google Earth, zoom in tight. You can see a lot of these transition zones where your grass transitions to the sand, and the sand transitions to a larger grassed area, and then on the opposite side of that, it transitions into a muddy, silty bottom into the tidal channels. So there's a lot that can be gathered. You just got to zoom in tight to see it.
So if I was trying to follow everything and retain it. So if I'm looking at that, I'm not saying bring that slide back up, but if we're looking at that and zone 1 is from like the deeper water onto the flat, and then zone 2 is the flat onto the grassy area, and zone 3 is more of the tidal creeks that go within the grassy area. How do you determine on this given morning whether you're going to target zone 1, 2, or 3?
Okay, that's another good question, Gary. A lot of times, what I have found is that you can target pretty much all 3 species throughout, and it's just a matter of fishing. Sometimes you go out and you do a lot of catching. Other times you're going to go out and you're going to have to fish for them and find them. From the deeper water up to zone 1, a lot of times you have the tendency to catch speckled trout, flounder as they're pulling off of those shoals into the deeper water. And as I come into the more grassy areas, I have seems like more success catching speckled trout and drum in there than I do to flounder. Flounder don't like to be situated in amongst a larger bed of grass that doesn't have much of a transition zone. Coming on the offside of that into where those tidal creeks are at, I found that red drum use those areas migration zones as they're moving through, following bait, and the flounder will stage it there as well. So those are the kind of three areas that I would expect to catch either speckled trout, a red drum, or a flounder in those areas. And we're sitting here talking, but you're subject to catch any of them anywhere. Fish will make a lyre out of you.
And then if we're working these transition zones or we're sort of targeting the different areas of a flat, how is it that you're primarily moving it around? Is it trolling motor? Is it wind drift? Is it putting on your white gloves and pulling me around trying to get me to catch a fish?
Right. So ideally, if I'm fishing the area that we just had up, we can go back to that first picture there. If we're fishing that and I find a good area that I would like to enter, you have a southwest wind that's going to kind of push you parallel with all of the different zones that we have. Gary, I'd get right into the heart of it. And we'd work through the center of that grassed area and work from zone 1 down towards zone 3. If we are successful and we catch a fish, a lot of times what I like to do is use a power pole or stick it anchor to hold the ground where we're at and see if there's any others in that area. If we don't locate fish on a particular drift, I may move us more closer to the bank side, and we drift through there. But as you're working your way through, you're going to find some cooperative fish for the most part. You just got to get in there and hunt them down and find them.
So as far as core sound goes, man, how clear is that water? Do you find sight fishing opportunities, or it doesn't really allow for that?
On certain times of the year, the water is more clear than others. A lot of times on the bank side, the water is more clear than it is on the land side. So you do have opportunities for sight fishing. There's times where the water does get cloudy, but for the most part, it's pretty clear water. And as you're pushing through, you may have the opportunity to, see some trout or drum. As they're, swimming through. Oftentimes you can see them. I have and pitch through them and catch them. Other times, I like to make long casts. So, as you're working the structure and working these various zones, you could have fish out there that you aren't aware of.
Well, I tell you what, man, I feel like we still have a lot to cover. So I'm going to try to channel it this way. So if we're on a summer trip, we'll just say like July or August, and we're on a summer trip, you and I, and our goal is an inshore slam. And why don't you tell me like what your plan would be? Of course, like you said, fish will make liars out of you and you can plan away and then plans change. But as far as like your plan for trout, red drum, flounder, like what zone and what we're going to throw, like how we're going to target it. I guess I'm channeling you into more of like gear and tackle. How would you love for it to go if you could script it?
Well, a perfect day, if you will, I guess to begin with. If you're starting early morning, a good topwater bait. A lot of times you can pick up on some trout or drum with a spook junior. Head and spook junior is a good bait. Your Missouri makes some good baits. Whatever you have confidence in and throwing topwater. I also find that working popping corks is probably one of my go-tos with a 16th or an 1/8 ounce bucktail up underneath it, paired up with a gulp bait. I think those are certainly good baits, and probably my go-to is a popping cork. And depending on,
I was going to ask why a bucktail? Why do you prefer a bucktail over like just a jig head?
Well, I've had more success, if you will, I guess, with the bucktail, and I think that with the bucktail, and I'll show you an example here if you can see it. Am I on screen here, Gary? I can't even see myself.
Yeah, you sure are, man. You're looking great.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. So this right here is one example of the bucktails that I do throw. It's a 16th ounce bucktail made by 43-2 Fish, and Travis Harrison is a custom tackle maker, does a really good job. What I do like about these bucktails is that they are fairly light. They give the bait a little more dimension than just a jig head with a goat bait or a plastic coming off of it. And I think this bucktail also slows the descent, keeping the bait more in the strike zone of the fish that we're targeting. What I like about that is if I use a 2-foot fluorocarbon leader, which is usually 15 to 20 pound, off of the popping cork, and I've got 2 different popping corks that I do use. Here's an example of one. It's a Billy Bay, just a more slender popping cork. Then here's another Billy Bay popping cork that I oftentimes use. And if we have a light wind, I will use this more slender version than I will on a stronger wind. But all right, so a 2-foot leader coming off of it. I've caught all 3 species using that bucktail with a goat bait, and as I'm working through fishing the flats, certainly has been productive for me no matter what zone I'm in. So that's what I would initially target. If I don't find that to be successful, I'd pull out Johnson silver minnow. That's gold colored in nature. Another good bait would be a Z-Man chatterbait. That would be more of a search bait as I'm trying to locate fish. So these are some baits that I have found to be successful to me, and other opportunities that you do have. If you want to fish just a plain jig head with a goat bait or plastic on the end of it, certainly whatever you have confidence in. I find that white is a really good color. White with a chartreuse tail is another good combination. And if push comes to shove, another a bait that I throw a lot of times is this Strike King Redfish Magic bait. Depends on what color you want to fish. Again, white or chartreuse color. That gold flash a lot of times will generate strike. I've caught all 3 species on that. So as you're working through, you got to throw what you have confidence in throwing, and you will end up catching fish through these flats if you work them hard enough. Now, it's not all about artificial bait either. I think one good note is to be able to throw a cast net. There's a lot of fresh live bait that you can capture on your way to the flats, whether it be pogies or mullet or some shrimp, depending on the season. All of those live baits are excellent to use when targeting all 3 species. And I'm not opposed to using cut bait when fishing for red drum. You may have a red drum turn their nose up at a artificial bait time and time again, but you throw a piece of fresh cut bait in front of them, a lot of times you're going to hook up on them.
So I'm going to guess that drifting isn't a bait situation, but if you find something with a search or you get a fish and you put your power pole down or your stick it pin, like that's when you might employ the bait presentation?
Yeah. So if you locate fish and you want to power pole down, you can take you a live shrimp. I like to throw those out on a weightless line with a 2-aught bait keeper hook. Basically just throw them out as I am fan casting the area with an artificial bait. I'll have a live bait out there working as well. Put it in the rod holder. It can be fishing while you are continuing to fish. Now, other opportunities for fishing, and if you're fishing cut bait, is to power pole down and pretty much throw several baits off towards whatever area you feel that the fish will be working, and this will be red drum, and work that with cut bait. And if you're looking to target specifically red drum, certainly a good opportunity to do that and move around till you can locate them.
All right, I got a couple of follow-ups, as I do. So I like the idea of that light bucktail underneath the popping cork. I think I asked about the jig head just because it seems like the jig head's the go-to, but I definitely understand the logic with the bucktail. So if I'm on your boat and I have marginal skills to okay skills, what's the advice you give to clients before they start throwing out and working a popping cork? What advice do you give them, or what sort of guidance do you give them?
Well, a lot of times when you are working this, you got enough clarity of the water where you can see the underwater structure, whether it be an isolated grass patch or as you're working through, make long cast and work it all the way back to the boat. I mean, I've caught fish as soon as the popping cork hits the water, and I've caught them all the way to you about to pick it up out of the water and put it in the boat, and had fish hit it right at the boat. So that'd be probably the biggest advice is to just work the popping cork. And as you are, you're going to pop it, let it settle back down for a couple seconds, give it another pop, reel in the slack, and just work it all the way back in.
If we're drifting, are you telling me to cast in the direction we're drifting, like cast it forward?
Yeah, you'd be. I mean, if you were fishing with me, you'd be working off the bow of the boat. I'd be in control of it, and I'd have you casting in the direction that we're drifting. I'd keep the boat slowed down, whether I have to use the power pole or, there's nothing wrong necessarily with using the trolling motor in certain circumstances, but the more you can stay in the drift mode, I think it's better. So use whatever method you have to either slow your drift or stop your drift, work an area, drift through, and continue working that area until you locate the fish.
What about advice you give clients when you put a spoon in their hand?
Simply just throw it out and reel it in. You just keep a steady retrieve with it. You're trying to just get the flash out, draw the attention of the fish. Make long casts as long as you're capable of doing. Reaching out and covering as much ground as you can. One time that I fish with a spoon, I'm trying to locate the fish. After I do that, I may scale down and fish with a bucktail or fish with another bait that I have more confidence in. But if you have confidence, keep throwing, but make long casts and just reel it in. Keep a steady retrieve.
All right. I think we exhausted my follow-up questions on the sort of the bait selection, the artificial lure selection you gave me at least. And I'm glad you talked about bait, actual bait, because I was going to ask that, when are we in a bait situation? What else, man? I know you had a list of stuff you wanted to cover. I'm not sure how to set you up with the next question. I'm just eager to hear what else you have to share.
I think probably some of the biggest things that I've walked away from with learning over the years and fishing the flats is you will not fully understand what all a shallow water body has to offer until you get in there and explore. Find some days that you got weather in your favor, let the wind work for you, push you through and make a day out of it and enjoy it. You're going to have times where you go in and you learn things. You learn where these tidal channels come in, how fish relate to that, whether it be speckled trout, red drum, or flounder. Fish areas thoroughly, work slowly, and just absorb what you can while you're out there. There are a lot of different options, ways to pursue fishing the flats. You're not going to learn anything about it staying on the outside. You got to get in the middle of it and explore those three zones that I was talking about, and learn what you can from it.
All right. How about I made a comment about a scientific paper because we were talking about all these different variables. But again, if I were to ask you to sort of simplify it for us, maybe again by framing it as far as like the perfect morning or the perfect afternoon, whatever. So what's your favorite tide?
I prefer getting in again on a high flood tide, fishing the last couple of hours of flood tide and first couple hours of the falling tide. Most ideal would be winds that are around 5, no more than 10 miles an hour. I think when you get winds in excess of 10, conditions start to get a little bit more rough. Certainly when they exceed 15, you may be looking for areas that have a buffered bank to get in and fish. But those would be the primary times or conditions that I would look for and getting in and fishing some of these flats.
And that flood tide and fall tide, is it you have a theory as to why that's the best producer?
No, if you just ask for favorite time or most preferred time. It just gives you more access to more of the area when you have more water to work with. Again, I've got another boat that I operate out of that has 10 inches of draft. I can get through most anywhere I want to be. I know there's certain areas I can't get across on a completely falling out tide, but I've had success at all stages of the tides. But flood tide certainly gives you the most access to more of the area.
Does a core sound have a big tidal flux? I mean, is there a big difference between high tide water and low tide water?
Now you're looking around a foot to 1.2 feet as far as a tide swing between high tide and low tide. But when you're not dealing with just a couple feet to begin with, certainly you can lose navigable water. If you got 2 feet and you lose a little over half of that, you're dealing with less than a foot of water that you can work through. A lot of times you're going to find this on these flats or shallow waters that you're trying to work through. So that's why I say a flood tide will give you the most water to work with, and having basically a 4-hour window to get in, fish, and if you need to get out, come on out. If you don't, find you an area to work on low tide that you can navigate through and enjoy the day.
Longest time that you've spent high and dry on a flat?
Probably about 4 or 5 hours.
All right. Right on. Hey man, I think you've already given us your final thoughts when I sort of set you up, but I just don't want to move away from you. We're coming to the end. Do you have a Jerry Springer final thought for us, man?
Well, I think you led into that. If you do end up high and dry, it's not necessarily the end of the day. A good thing to have in your boat is some quality boat shoes. If you find that you don't have a way to navigate out of the flats, anchor your boat up. Get out and walk some of these flats and continue to fish. You don't have to stay right there. You can wade fish. Certainly good opportunities. I've enjoyed doing that even when I didn't have the boat completely bottomed out. But you're going to learn some lessons along the way, just like I have if you get in and explore. But I can promise you, you get in and fish the flats, you'll find that they can be very productive waters and certainly enjoyable when pursuing an inshore slam.
Captain Tommy Sports Fishing Adventures out of the sea level area, targeting the core sound primarily. Man, thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. I certainly do appreciate the time to talk with you.
You got it, man. Thanks again, Tommy. All right, Billy. That brings us to you. That brings us to Billy's best takeaway.
Man, so many good takeaways in that episode. I've never really done that style of fishing, like flats fishing or whatnot. I mean, maybe a couple times with somebody else, but definitely not on my own boat for obvious reasons. However, if I did have a boat, I would make sure I've been in one of those situations where I'm like, dude, we're about to be out here for a minute, and I didn't bring an extra pack of crackers or bologna sandwich or nothing. Like, I'm about to be hungry, but to like prepare and know the capabilities of your boat and your ability as a captain, I think is huge, because you get in these skinny waters, man, it's nerve-wracking anyway. Just being a pedestrian on the boat or whatever I would call it, passenger. I know I've been in situations where I'm like, my butthole's gonna eat this seat because we ain't gonna make it, so be prepared. I think that was what I took away the most, was like, be super real with yourself. Like, can I do this? Can I navigate these skinny waters and come out of here? Not that you're gonna die, but dude, getting stuck out there for even 4 or 5 hours in the hot sun sounds miserable.
Yeah, I mean, I like his approach. Like, just get out there and try it, man. Just get out there on the flat and try it. Yeah, you want to have some crackers or a bologna sandwich for sure. Like, I mean, I like it. I think I was kind of introduced to it behind Hatteras, and it is fun, man. Wind drifting, those flats, over grass, over different bottom, and just being methodical. And sometimes you get the sight fishing opportunities, and sometimes you're just covering water. And yeah, man, it's just a great day. And then, if you hook up, you're hooking up with a fish in like 2 feet of water. So you get to watch the fight unfold. You get to see it run around the boat or wherever it's going to run, as opposed to, disappearing and deeper water and being an up and down fight. I mean, it's great. It's great fun.
Yeah, man.
I welcome every opportunity, man. I like how Tommy's methodical, breaks it into zones, and just sort of, I'm guessing that's his style out on the water too, methodically covering those zones and covering different baits until he finds out what works, and makes sense to me.
Yeah, man. As I often say, these guys, people go, "Oh, they're fishermen," but they're like scientists, really. I mean, they're really figuring it out and charting stuff and making it happen, finding these fish, man. It's tough work. So I'm glad. And I love the aerial stuff that he sent to us too, man. That was cool. That was cool to see and hear how people look at Google Maps and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of good takeaways, Gary. A lot of good takeaways. So go to Marine Warehouse Center and get that boat that'll go in 10 inches of water. That's another takeaway. I got so many of them.
Yeah, you got to be like Tommy. If you only have one boat, then we're talking to you. Just like Tommy, you need a couple of boats, man. You need a 10-inch and a 14-inch boat for water clearance. Right? And Emmett and Terrell will take care of you, man. You just stop by with your credit card or maybe your bank statement, and they'll do the rest, man. They will hook you up.
And if you don't make enough money, you get a Bland Landscaping Company. I'm sure they can hook you up. tell me Fish Post guys sent you. Those Fish Post guys told me you'd beat my current rate. Please, I need a job. Well, man, it's been super fun, Gary. We'll catch you in the next one.
All right, Billy. Thank you.
Fisherman.